The cultural center was usually a noisy, colorful place every Friday evening. People from the neighborhood came to show their talents. Some sang, some danced, some told jokes, and a few even tried magic tricks. Everyone knew everyone, and most of the faces were familiar. That was part of the fun. You always knew what to expect. But that night, things felt slightly different. A quiet young woman walked through the door holding a violin case that looked older than her. The brown leather was scratched, the metal locks were dull, and the handle had been repaired with a small piece of tape. She wasn't wearing fancy clothes, just a simple sweater and jeans that looked worn from many washes. Her shoes were also old, but carefully cleaned. She stood near the entrance for a moment, unsure of where to go. People noticed her right away, not because she made a scene, but because she looked so out of place. Most performers came dressed as if they were going on a small stage, bright tops, shiny shoes, maybe a little makeup to catch the light, but she looked like someone who had come straight from work after a long day. A few people looked at her with curiosity, but others exchanged smirks. They whispered to each other, wondering what she was doing there with a violin case that looked like it belonged in a museum. The young woman, her name was Lena, quietly approached the registration table. Her voice was soft when she told the volunteer she wanted to perform. "Are you sure you're in the right line?" The volunteer asked politely, slightly confused. "Yes," she said with a nod. "I'd like to play tonight." The volunteer wrote her name on the list, still unsure, but didn't ask further questions. Lena stepped away and found a spot in the corner of the hall. She placed her violin case gently on her lap, as if it held something fragile and precious. Her fingers brushed the surface of it, almost like she was calming herself down. On the other side of the room, a group of regular performers were warming up. They often came together and treated the talent night like their own private stage. One of them noticed Lena and nudged the others. They turned to look, and one of them let out a small laugh. "Look at that," they whispered. "She's going to play with that." Another snorted. "Probably found it in her attic." Someone else said, "You think she can even tune it?" Their laughter wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough that Lena heard it. She didn't look up. She fixed her eyes on the old violin case and pretended she didn't hear anything. She took a slow breath, then another, steadying herself. Lena wasn't used to being the center of attention. Her life was simple. She worked at a small bakery early in the morning, packing bread, serving customers, wiping counters, and cleaning trays. She never complained, even when her back hurt from standing too long or when her hands felt stiff from kneading dough. She needed the job, and the people there were kind to her. But they didn't know much about her. No one really did. Most days, she went to work, came home, and stayed quiet. Her tiny apartment didn't have much, just a bed, a table, and a shelf where she kept some old music sheets. The violin case stayed on top of that shelf, always closed. She would take it down sometimes, hold it, think about playing, then put it back again. It had been years since she played in front of anyone. That violin was the one thing she had kept from her childhood. It belonged to her grandfather, who had taught her how to play when she was young. He wasn't a professional musician. He played for joy, for family dinners, small gatherings, or sometimes just to fill the house with music. Lena grew up listening to those warm sounds. After school, she would run to him, begging him to teach her a new tune. He always smiled and said, "Music is a gift you share, not something you hide." But life changed. Her family faced financial problems. Her grandfather passed away. The violin went into its case, and for a long time Lena couldn't bring herself to open it. Years passed. She worked, saved a little, survived, and carried on. But she always felt something missing inside her, like a quiet ache. Sometimes she played small recordings on her phone when washing dishes or before sleeping, just to feel close to the world she had left behind. Music was still there inside her, even if she didn't show it. One of her bakery customers once mentioned the cultural center's talent night. That stayed in her mind for days. She thought about it again and again until one morning she pulled the violin case from the shelf. She opened it slowly, almost in fear, but the instrument was still there, still hers, still waiting. That's how she ended up walking into the cultural center that evening, with courage she didn't know she had. The host called out the lineup for the night. Lena's name was near the end. She sat silently, listening to others perform. A singer with a strong voice belted out a pop song. A dancer did a fast, energetic routine. A guitar player played 3 songs back. The crowd applauded loudly for each one, shouting encouragements. When a comedian did a long set, Lena couldn't help smiling a little. He wasn't funny every minute, but his energy warmed the room. Yet, even during the laughter, some eyes kept glancing toward her, examining her old violin case like it was a mistake or a joke. Finally, after almost an hour, the host looked down at his list and said, "Next up we have Lena." Lena felt her heart skip. She stood up slowly, gripping the violin case tight. As she walked toward the stage, she heard a voice from the audience, louder than the rest, clearly meant for her. A musician. People laughed. Not everyone, but enough for the sound to cut deep. The host noticed the reaction and raised his hand. "All right, everyone. Let's give her a fair chance," he said with a smile. Lena walked onto the stage. Her legs felt heavy, like she was walking through water. She placed the case on the stool and opened it. The hall grew quieter as she pulled out the violin. It wasn't shiny or new. The wood was faded, the strings slightly old. But she touched it like it was priceless. She lifted the instrument and placed it under her chin. Her hands trembled a little. The microphone picked up the tiny shakes of the violin's surface. She looked down, closed her eyes, and took a slow breath. People in the front row exchanged doubtful looks. One whispered, "This is going to be awkward." Another softly laughed. Lena didn't hear them this time. She couldn't. She had told herself that once she reached this stage, she would give everything she had. She remembered her grandfather's words. She remembered nights when she cried because she missed playing. She remembered the joy music once brought to her. She held on to all of that. The bow touched the strings. For a moment, nothing moved. Then she drew the bow across with a gentle, steady motion. The first note floated into the air, soft, warm, trembling, but full of emotion. It wasn't loud, but it carried weight. People stopped talking. Someone in the back lowered their phone, suddenly unsure if they wanted to film or simply listen. Lena opened her eyes just slightly. She saw the crowd blur into shapes, then closed them again and kept playing. Her fingers remembered the notes like they had been waiting for this moment. Her bow moved with care, but also with confidence she didn't know she still had. The melody wasn't something people heard every day. It had hints of sadness, but also strength. A mixture that came from someone who had lived through difficult times and still held hope. The laughter died instantly. The whispers stopped. The room became so silent that every note seemed to echo perfectly. No one expected that sound from her. Not from the quiet girl with old clothes. Not from the violin that looked like it belonged in another era. Not from someone people assumed had no experience. But she played like someone who had lived. Inside music for the first time in years, she wasn't hiding. She wasn't working in a bakery. She wasn't the girl who kept her head down. She was someone pouring her heart into a melody that came from deep inside. The cultural center, usually full of noise, felt like a different world. People leaned forward in their seats without even realizing it. Even the group that had laughed earlier stared with wide eyes, completely silent. Lena didn't know how long she played. Time slipped away. She was just a girl trying to share something she loved, something she had carried quietly for years. When she finally finished and lowered her bow, she didn't look up right away. Her hands were shaking again, but for a different reason. Then she heard it. Not laughter, not whispers, a soft clap. Then another. Then, suddenly, the whole room applauded. Loudly, warmly, without hesitation. Lena finally lifted her head, eyes bright with surprise. People were standing. Some looked emotional. Others smiled at her as if seeing her for the first time. She had come there afraid, unsure, almost ready to run. But by the time she stepped off the stage, nothing about the room felt the same, and neither did she. The applause felt unreal to Lena. For a moment, she stood frozen at the side of the stage, holding her violin close to her chest like she was afraid someone might take the moment away from her. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. All her life, people had looked past her hatwork, on the street, even in school when she was younger. Being invisible had become normal, but now, people were actually coming toward her. A woman in a red jacket was the first to reach her. She touched Lena's arm gently and said, "That was beautiful. You play with so much heart." She didn't say it with a dramatic tone or fake excitement. It felt honest, warm, real. Another person came, then another. A group of teenagers who usually kept to themselves looked at her with wide eyes, whispering to each other. One of them said, "I didn't expect that. You're amazing." Lena didn't know how to respond. She kept repeating thank you because she didn't know what else to say. Her face turned slightly red each time someone offered a compliment. She didn't even know where to look. Her hands shook because the moment felt too big. To sudden. The host approached her next, smiling kindly. "You should come back and perform again," he said. "People loved you." His tone wasn't the type people used when they were just being polite. It was sincere. He even asked if she had any recordings online, but she shook her head quickly. "No, I don't," she said softly. "You should think about it," he told her. "You have something special. People connect to music like that." She nodded weakly. not entirely convinced but grateful. The idea of posting anything online felt overwhelming, but the fact that someone thought she could, that alone made her chest tighten with emotion. But not everyone approached her. The group that had laughed earlier stood together near the back of the room. Their expressions had changed completely. The smirks were gone. The confidence they carried earlier had faded into awkwardness. One of them scratched his head. Another kept looking at the floor. They didn't come forward to apologize, but they also didn't laugh anymore. Lena could feel their eyes on her, but not with mockery this time. More like embarrassment. She didn't hold it against them. That wasn't why she came. She just wanted to play, even if only once. After the event ended, people began packing up. Chairs scraped the floor, microphones were unplugged, and the buzz of conversation filled the room. Lena quietly packed away her violin, treating it with the same care she always had. But inside she felt something different, a gentle warmth, like a small flame finally being lit. As she walked toward the exit, the woman in the red jacket stopped her again. "Do you take lessons?" she asked. Lena shook her head. "No. I used to learn from my grandfather, but that was a long time ago." "He taught you well," the woman said with a smile. "If you ever want help finding a music teacher or joining a small group, I can connect you with people. This town has more musicians than you think." Lena wasn't sure how to respond. She thanked the woman again, then stepped outside. The night air was cool and gentle. A breeze brushed her face, calming her. She started walking toward her apartment, each step light like she wasn't touching the ground properly. The streetlights cast long shadows, and the sidewalks were mostly empty at that hour. She replayed every moment of the evening in her mind, the laughter, the silence, the first note she played, the applause. She kept hearing her grandfather's voice in her memory. Music is a gift you share. For the first time in many years, she felt like she had finally shared it again when she reached her apartment. She placed the violin case on her table and sat in front of it. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she let her fingers trace the old scratches on the surface, the same ones she used to touch when she was little. Then, slowly, she opened the case. The violin lay inside, its faded wood glowing softly in the dim room. She ran her thumb along the strings, checking them gently. They weren't perfect, but they still carried her sound. She smiled. That night, Lena couldn't sleep easily. She lay in bed thinking about everything, turning from one side to the other. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't anxious. She was simply full of emotions she hadn't felt in years. A mixture of pride, disbelief, and a warm kind of joy that felt new but also familiar. The next morning, she woke earlier than usual, even though she had the day off. She decided to go for a walk before breakfast. She wasn't expecting anything special. She just needed fresh air to clear her mind. But when she stepped outside, she realized something was different. The owner of the small convenience shop waved at her. He usually didn't notice her much, but today he said, "Saw you at the center last night. Didn't know you could play like that." Lena blinked in surprise. "You were there. My niece was performing," he said. "You played after her. You were great." She thanked him shyly, then continued walking. When she reached the bakery where she worked, even though she wasn't scheduled for a shift, one of her coworkers spotted her through the window and came rushing out. "You didn't tell us you played violin," her coworker exclaimed, pulling her into a quick hug. "My brother recorded some of your performance. You're all over his video right now. People are talking about you." Lena's eyes widened. "Talking about me? About how good you were?" Her coworker didn't exaggerate for attention. She was genuinely excited. Lena stood there speechless for a moment. She wasn't used to being noticed. She wasn't used to being praised. She wasn't used to feeling seen. Later that day, she sat in a small park near her apartment, watching children play and families walk their dogs. She held the violin case on her lap again, not because she planned to play outside, but because the instrument suddenly felt like a part of her life again, not just an old memory gathering dust. She remembered the faces of the people who listened the night before, the way the room had fallen silent, the way they stood and clapped. She remembered how she felt while playing, the sense of belonging, of doing something that mattered. She wondered what would happen if she returned next week, or the week after. Would people want to hear her again? Would she be able to keep improving? Could she really bring her music back into her life? Her thoughts were interrupted when she saw a few familiar faces walking into the park. The group that had laughed at her earlier. They hadn't noticed her yet. They were talking among themselves, holding drinks, looking relaxed. For a moment, Lena felt her stomach twist. Not from fear, but from old memories of being teased or underestimated. She looked away, hoping they would pass by without stopping. But one of them recognized her. His expression changed immediately. He nudged the others and pointed subtly. The group approached her slowly. She prepared herself for anything: awkwardness, fake compliments, or worse, more jokes. But when they stopped in front of her, the first one spoke in a quiet voice. "Hey, about last night," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. We were wrong." Another stepped forward. "You really blew us away. Honestly, we didn't expect it." The third added, "We shouldn't have laughed. That was rude." Lena didn't say anything right away. She studied their faces, unsure if they were being genuine. But their eyes didn't carry the same mocking shine as before. They looked embarrassed, even uncomfortable, but sincere. "It's okay," she said softly. "No," the first one replied. "It wasn't. But you proved us wrong, and you earned our respect." The words settled in the air between them, not dramatic, not emotional, but meaningful. The group left after a few more awkward exchanges, giving her small nods of respect. Once they were gone, Lena let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She felt lighter, stronger, more grounded as the sun began to set. She returned home carrying not just her violin, but also a growing sense of purpose. She realized that the night at the cultural center was more than a performance. It was the start of something she didn't know she needed, something her grandfather had always hoped she would carry with her: a love for music that could touch people, inspire them, maybe even change their hearts. Lena placed her violin back on the shelf that evening, but this time she didn't close the case completely. She left it slightly open, as if inviting herself to pick it up again soon. In the quiet of her apartment, she whispered to herself, "Maybe I can really do this." The world outside didn't change overnight, but inside her, something had awakened, something steady, hopeful, and unshakable. Something she knew she wouldn't hide again, and even though she couldn't see the future, one thing was certain: the laughter that once made her doubt herself had turned into applause that she would never forget.